Alafia. I'm Philip John Neimark, the founder of the Iyanifa Foundations of North and Latin America. And yes, believe it or not, I'm the kid in Malcom X and the White Kid. If you're a little confused, well, it all happened 50 years ago. Hard to believe. I was a radio and television producer in Chicago. And for reasons that I honestly don't recall, the host and myself were invited to the Black Muslim National Convention, which was held at the Coliseum, which no longer exists, and to which no Caucasians or white people had ever been invited. And so off we went to South State Street in Chicago to the Coliseum for the annual Black Muslim Convention. We were seated in the front row, the host of the show and myself, with a Niagara recorder in my lap. And it soon became apparent that we were the only white people out of 16,000 black Muslims that were attending. I was not 10 feet away from Elijah, who at the podium, and he was a very small man, and he was flanked on both sides by the Fruit of Islam, which were basically very large, very formidable, karate-trained bodyguards. And in the back, behind him, were his two acolytes or heir apparents, Louis Farrakhan on one side of the chairs, and Malcom X on the other. It was an interesting and strange situation to sit there as the only two Caucasians in the audience and listen to 15,000 plus chant, "Kill the White Devil." After the convention, I did that which most television and radio producers had tried in the past unsuccessfully, and that was to contact the black Muslim community on the south side of Chicago and see if Malcom would agree to an interview. No, never happened before. And for whatever reasons, even though in my current line of work I have definitely come to the point where I do believe that there are no mistakes in the universe, we received an invitation to meet and interview Malcom in the schoolroom of the Black Muslim School in the Woodlawn area of Chicago. Back in those days, one of the big thrusts of the Black Muslim community was to quit being taken advantage of by the, quote, white folks, and to have everything their own stores, their own school, their own housing, etc. And this was a school run by Elijah and the black Muslims. And I remember going into the classroom with the same Niagara recorder, and there, perched on one of the little wooden desks, the kind you slide into and it lifts up, was the very tall and imposing figure of Malcom X. To make a long story short, this began 3 days of interviews. What was supposed to be a half hour turned into probably 12 or 15 hours of taping. Whether it was because Malcom sensed that there was no antagonism or hostility in me, whether he sensed that he would get an honest shake, I don't know. I do know it took place, and during that time, I was educated in two areas. One, the internal perspective of the black American who had been, for the most part, taken significant advantage of by the community overwhelmingly white in the United States. And two, I suddenly saw in Malcom, as he told his story, as he talked about being in jail, as he talked about having been a pimp earlier in his life, how he talked about his hopes and his aspirations for his people. The absolute first charismatic religious or spiritual leader I had ever encountered. I will preface this by saying that while I was part of interviews with dozens, if not more, of the top black leaders during the 1950s, we never did have the opportunity to interview Martin Luther King. So I don't know whether he falls in or outside that category. But I do know that my general feeling that the overwhelming majority of those who were the leaders of the community, the heads of the marches, etc., was that they were doing it as much for their own empowerment and aggrandizement as they were for the health of their people. Malcolm was different. It was clear that Malcolm was not doing this to be rich or to be famous. Malcolm was doing it because it was what he was brought here to do. And as the years passed, and I watched the breakup of Malcolm from Elijah, and his first trip to the Far East to explore the Muslim culture there, not as a color image, but as a philosophical image. I remember him having the opportunity of speaking with him again and saying to him, wasn't he worried about what might happen, the animosity? Animosity I felt later in my life, because believe me, at that time it never occurred to me I would be in the spiritual business. But the same animosity that was projected at me when I left the Afro-Cuban version of Ifa, Santeria Lukumi, to study the genuine African way, and then subsequently to spend 40 years of my life teaching them. And his answer was parsed. It was almost as if he knew that they were very likely to kill him. But that if that's the way it was supposed to be or meant to be, that's the way it would be. Because he had to do that which his heart and his soul and his brilliant mind told him needed doing. So what's the point of this 50-year reminiscence from the white kid who is now a 70-year-old man teaching and preaching and philosophy that comes from Africa? Well, the point is that one must, no matter what, stay focused on what the truth as you perceive it is. That no matter what the threats or what the downsides of maintaining that position of integrity is, that it's the only way to fulfill your destiny and to fulfill your life. And it also taught me what a genuine, charismatic leader, because in my opinion, Malcolm is there with Gandhi as one of the great figures of our time, a figure whose ideals need recapturing. And by the way, in my heart of hearts, I believe that had Malcolm lived, that he would have encountered Ifa in Africa, and he would have found the opportunities and the logic and the purity of it exceptionally acceptable to him. But we'll never know that. What we will know is that there was a man who could have, and perhaps someday will, change the world. And this white kid, 50 years ago, whether I realized it or not, had the privilege, had the opportunity, and had the experience of being illuminated and influenced by his presence. Until next time, love and blessings. For more information, see us on the internet at ifafoundation.org. That's ifafoundation.org.